Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. April 15th, 2026, and the northern grouping is on a streak. 8 advanced sectors today. 24 square kilometers for Russia. 0.02 for Ukraine. The Kharkiv bridgehead has finally turned inland. Russian forces are in the center of Myropilia. Vovchansky Kutori is nearly cleared, and the foliage hasn't even arrived yet. In Berlin, a €4 billion defense package was signed with a planning horizon of 2027. That's your answer on whether peace is coming this year. Let us get into it. April 15th continues the series of exceptionally productive 24-hour periods for Russian forces. 8 advanced sectors were recorded over the past day, 7 of which fall within the area of responsibility of the northern grouping. The total territorial gain for the day amounts to 24.15 square kilometers. The Ukrainian side recorded 0.02 square kilometers over the same period, a school building and a multi-story residential block retaken in Kupansk. Those who have not yet seen yesterday's briefing are strongly advised to do so, as it covered in detail the northern grouping's breakthrough on the Myrapilia bridgehead. 60 square kilometers in 24 hours, according to Ukrainian data, up to 80 according to American assessments. Today's events are developing along the same logic. Sumy direction. The Kharkiv bridgehead moves inland. On the Kharkiv bridgehead of Sumy Oblast, an expected but no less significant operational shift has occurred. Throughout the entire preceding month, the bridgehead was expanding exclusively along the state border horizontally. There was no movement inland into Ukrainian territory. Today that changed. North of Kharkiv, northern grouping units advanced 1.7 kilometers inland, entering the massif known as Dovyi Lis and consolidating there. Current positions are now less than 1.5 kilometers from the southern outskirts of Yastrebshchina. Taking this settlement under control is critically important for further offensive development. The logic is straightforward. If Yastrebshchina passes under control, an attack on Ulanov becomes possible. The fall of Ulanov, in turn, removes any operational rationale for holding the broad adjacent territory, predominantly open fields with sparse tree lines that cannot be held without nearby populated settlements. The prospects for development on this sector look encouraging. Sumy direction. The main bridgehead. Myrapilia. On the main Sumy bridgehead, 2 separate events of different scales were recorded over the past 24 hours. The first is modest but real. South of Varakine, Russian forces advanced across a sector 1.2 kilometers wide to a depth of 800 meters, establishing control over a tree line. The gain amounts to approximately 1 square kilometer. A small figure, but every meter covered requires effort and carries risk, so it should not be understated. The second event is large-scale and unexpected, even for those who had been closely monitoring the situation. The maximum advance depth on the Myrapilia sector reached 4.85 kilometers. But the figures are not the whole story. The northern grouping has reached the central part of Myrapilia. This is a fundamentally significant moment. Just a few weeks ago, when Russian forces first reached Myrapilia, the situation seemed comparable to Unakivka, a considerably smaller settlement that was fought over for half a year. Myropilia is an order of magnitude larger. Before the war, its population was 3,000, at its peak 6,000. Yet the pace of advance has turned out to be significantly higher than expected. The northern part of the settlement is almost entirely cleared, and Russian fighters have already reached the center. The operational consequences of Myropilia passing under full control are clear. The territory to the north will immediately be cleared to the state border. To the south, the advance will proceed along the highway toward Myrapilia. Everything east to the border will also come under control. The result is a buffer zone, 7 to 8 kilometers deep. Kharkiv direction. Forest massifs and Vovchansky Kutori. On the Kharkiv direction, several advances were recorded over the past 24 hours, that together point to a general trend. Forest massifs are yielding to the Russian army noticeably more readily than before. And this is happening before the foliage has appeared, several weeks before the canopy fully closes. What is happening now in the open forests is merely a precursor to what will follow. On the Liptsy sector, Russian forces advanced 1.7 kilometers from the borderline and east of Zelene. establishing control over the forest massif known as Plosky Lis. This brings positions closer to the outskirts of Ternova. On the Verkhnya Pisarivka sector, no cartographic updates yet, but reports from the field indicate advances in the forest massifs continue, simply with the usual delay in verifying materials. The main event on the Kharkiv direction over the past day is the advance in Vovchansky Khutori. The result is more than confident, over 1.5 kilometers through residential built-up area, specifically 1.6 kilometers. Approximately 1.5 kilometers remain before the settlement completes clearing and passes fully under Russian control. Additionally, north of Zybin and north of Bakhkov, Russian forces are clearing forest massifs. North of Bakhkov, the result is particularly significant, an advance in the forest massif across a sector 3.5 kilometers wide. The operational logic here is direct. Once the forest massif west of Bakhkov itself is taken, holding the settlement becomes practically impossible for the Ukrainian side. It will find itself in complete forest encirclement. All of the described advances are occurring under conditions where foliage has not yet appeared. In 2 to 3 weeks, when the greenery closes the forest canopy from above, the tempo may increase substantially. Kostiantinivka direction. Dova Balka confirmed. On the Kostiantinivka direction, the single advance of the day outside the northern grouping's area of responsibility has received official cartographic confirmation. Video materials have been published verifying the entry of Russian forces into Dova Balka from the south. This information had been circulating for a week. Today, the confirmation arrived, and the map has been corrected accordingly. Dova Balka is a serious fortified area situated on elevated ground. Control over it opens the ability to observe and correct fire to significant depth. Fighting for this objective continues. Kupansk direction, back and forth without progress. On the Kupansk direction, no cartographic changes, save for a minor tactical episode on the Ukrainian side. Ukrainian forces retook a school building and one multi-story residential block. Area 0.02 square kilometers. The overall picture of Kupansk has remained unchanged for several months. The city constitutes a large-scale grey zone, with both sides present and neither holding stable control. Russian forces periodically enter individual districts. Ukrainian forces conduct counterattacks. No systematic progress in either direction exists. Notably, the intensity of Ukrainian counterattacks has decreased substantially compared to the peak of activity in December and January, which may indicate a shrinking resource base on this sector. The logistics problems limiting Russian offensive development within the city limits also remain unresolved. In the foreseeable future, the Kupiansk situation does not suggest a rapid resolution in either side's favor. Zaparisia direction, pressure maintained. On the Zaparisia direction, no cartographic changes over the past 24 hours, but the front line remains in an active state. On the Kharkiv sector, Russian strikes against Kharkiv and the surrounding area continue, but no confirmed advances have been recorded. The front line in the Primorsky and Stepnohirsk area is also active. Both sides continue operations without recordable changes. On the Huliapol direction, 2 video materials were received. The first, from the vicinity of Huliapilske, documents the engagement of a small Ukrainian infantry group near the settlement. Ukrainian military presence at this point is confirmed. It may be a fortified strongpoint or assault groups attempting to reach Russian positions. The second material came from Kosivtsev, slightly to the north. Russian forces advanced approximately 1 kilometer into the southern part of the settlement, taking new positions. A qualification is warranted. The adjacent territory had previously been marked in favor of the Russian army, but was in all likelihood actually in grey zone status, without confident control. Today's advance from Ternuvate into Kosivtsev clarifies actual control. This is precisely what the formulation advance of up to 1 kilometer means. On the Krosvsk direction, no map changes, but reports are arriving of zone of control expansion north of Molodetska, Vdakhna and Kotlino towards Serhivka, as well as active fighting in the areas of Shevchenko, Pavlivka and Novopavlivka. The political dimension. Berlin, the details of the agreements. The meeting between Zelensky and German Chancellor Merz in Berlin produced specific outlined agreements that warrant detailed coverage. A defense package of €4 billion has been signed. Germany undertakes to finance a contract for several hundred interceptor missiles for Patriot air defense systems and is transferring 36 Iris-T launch units to Ukraine. A separate €300 million is allocated to developing Ukrainian long-range weapons, building production capacity on Ukrainian territory itself. A joint production program for medium-range drones with integrated artificial intelligence is being launched. The first batch is 5,000 UAVs for the Ukrainian armed forces. The question of Patriot missiles warrants a separate comment. Germany recently, with considerable public fanfare, transferred 5 interceptor missiles for this system to Ukraine. The announcement of hundreds of missiles looks ambitious against that backdrop. It is evident that Berlin intends to procure them from the United States. However, American air defense arsenals have been substantially depleted in the course of the Iranian campaign, and the American side's ability to promptly cover demand of this scale remains in question. Merz's statement about facilitating the return of Ukrainian men of military age from Germany to their homeland was one of the most resonant elements of the Berlin talks. The Chancellor's formulation ran as follows: the parties intend to limit the number of Ukrainian men seeking asylum in Germany, since their presence in Ukraine is important for the country. Zelensky unambiguously supported this statement. The practical meaning is clear: gradual compulsory repatriation of military-age men. This is an attempt to at least partially close the mobilization deficit that is one of the systemic problems of the Ukrainian armed forces in the current phase of the conflict. The analytical conclusion from the Berlin visit remains unchanged. The entire package of agreements, financial, military, technical, mobilization, is oriented not toward current fighting, but toward the horizon of 2027. This is the foundation of Ukraine's military campaign for next year. The signed agreements mean one thing: none of the parties with influence over the conflict expects or is preparing for peace in 2026. The Middle East, demands and contradictions. In the Middle East, the diplomatic dimension is acquiring an increasingly multi-layered character. Iran's permanent representative to the United Nations officially presented compensation demands to 5 regional states: Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the UAE, and Jordan, for participation in the American and Israeli military campaign against Iran. Tehran is signaling its intent to establish the legal accountability of coalition states. Saudi Arabia, in turn, publicly called on Washington to lift the Hormuz blockade and return to a negotiating track with Iran. Riyadh's position is understandable. An attempt at forcible unblocking of the strait carries the risk of chain escalation that could affect other vital maritime arteries. If Iran activates its connections with the Houthis to close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, oil exports from Persian Gulf states would be effectively blocked from 2 directions simultaneously. This is precisely the scenario the Arabian monarchies fear most. U.S. Vice President Vance confirmed the unchanged American position. Washington demands from Iran the complete abandonment of uranium enrichment and the opening of the Strait of Hormuz as mandatory preconditions. According to him, Tehran's refusal to unblock the strait will fundamentally alter the course of negotiations. The parties thus remain on fundamentally incompatible positions. Iran demands compensation and sees no grounds for concessions. The United States demands capitulation on key issues as the entry ticket to negotiations. The Arabian monarchies find themselves caught between 2 fires, incapable of fighting independently, afraid to support further escalation. Consolidated assessment. April 15th confirms the trend that emerged at the start of April. The northern grouping is operating in a mode of high operational activity, methodically building pressure across a broad front. The key events of the day, the beginning of inland movement from the Komarivka bridgehead, the advance to the center of Myropilia, the progress in Vovchansky Kutori, and a series of forest breakthroughs in Kharkiv Oblast. With foliage not yet present, the results already show a shift in tempo. In 2 to 3 weeks, when the greenery closes the forest canopy, the picture may change even more dramatically. The Berlin agreements in the political dimension definitively lock in the conflict horizon beyond 2026. Anyone expecting the war to end before the close of this year will find neither military nor diplomatic grounds for that forecast in today's events. Briefing compiled as of April 15, 2026. Data on Vovchansky Khutori, Myropilia, the Huliopol direction, and the Berlin agreements continues to be refined as additional materials arrive.